Justice for Daunte Wright. We are on verdict watch right now in the Kim Potter manslaughter trial. The former Minnesota police officer's fate is in the hands of the jury. The jurors have been deliberating for more than 2 days, 14 hours now. Could we see a verdict today, or will we ever actually see a verdict? Let's bring in our justice correspondent, Candace Kelley, right now this morning to talk about that. Candace, good morning to you. And Candace, from what I'm hearing, the jury asking what happens if they can't reach a consensus kind of smells like a hung jury to me right now. What do you think?
Agreed. It smells like a hung jury. They want to make sure, especially before during Christmas, what are their options if they cannot get there? And their options are to follow their gut, follow their heart. As the judge eventually told them, listen, I'm going to give you the instructions again. Go back and see what you can do. And that created an objection from the defense. But the bottom line is that they do want to reach a verdict, because if there is a hung jury, then it's going to be a mistrial. Then the charges can happen again. And then we're going to be at all of this from the beginning again. And certainly a lot of people don't want that. I don't think any side wants that. So that's why the judge, and generally judges, will encourage the jury to go in and keep at it. Let's keep at it. Let's get a decision. That's why we're here.
And Candace, you brought up a good point, because, hey, here we are just 3 days away from Christmas and they want to get home to their families. How much do you think that could play a factor with any potential holdouts?
Timing is always a factor. I think it's interesting that the jury got to spend the weekend kind of thinking about Kim Potter's testimony. That was an interesting timing event, if you will, that they had those 2 days. Now we are coming upon Christmas and the holidays. People still have to get things done during the day. I mean, if they're hosting Christmas, you better forget about it if you are sitting on that jury and you go until Thursday. That's going to be a tough act to follow. So I think that they definitely have that in mind, which is why they asked right now, just in case, if we can't get there, what are our options? Like, what is the process? How do we tell you, Judge, that we're done and we just haven't reached a verdict? I think Christmas and the timing definitely plays into it, as it always does during these types of trials.
And as you mentioned, if there is a hung jury, they more than likely will have to do this all over again. All right, so maybe they can reach some kind of consensus here, because they are asking other questions. They asked the judge to let them handle Potter's gun without the zip ties. I guess they had the zip ties on the guns for their safety. There are no weapons, ammunition in those weapons right now. But the defense objected to the judge letting them do this. Why?
Well, listen, the defense does not want the jury getting their hands on those guns. As you said, the taser and the gun, they're zip tied inside a box of evidence. They can look at it and examine it. What they want to do is hold it. They want to put themselves in the shoes of Kim Potter, because as we know, there was a lot of testimony describing the differences between the taser and the Glock, the taser and the gun, the size, the weight, the color, the feel in terms of the grip and the grooves. They want to themselves in Kim Potter's shoes and say, okay, what was she actually going through? Because during her testimony, which there wasn't a whole lot of comprehensive thoughts there, but what she did say is that she just didn't know that she had the taser. Is this true? Could she have known? Should she have known by having that taser or gun in her hand, if you will, in her hand, that she knew that it should have been a gun? There's a difference in weight, difference in color, as I said, size, so many differences. They're putting themselves in the shoes of Kim Potter. I assure you, each one of those people in the jury has held that gun and they have held that taser, and now they are comparing the two. It was a great question that the jury has. I'm surprised that they didn't ask about getting these zip ties loosened much earlier in their deliberations. As you said, we're going now into, 14, 15 hours when we start again for deliberations today.
And like you said, Candace, that's a great question. The prosecution wants to hear the jury asking the judge as well, so they can hear the difference between the gun and that taser as well. Look, we heard all the evidence presented beforehand, before closing arguments, before they started deliberating. Let's go back though. What do you think is the most compelling evidence that was actually presented?
You know, I think there were two things that stuck out for me. Besides, of course, the recording, we have that play-by-play. What was interesting was the police officer, Michael Johnson. I think that he really changed the game, because he was the witness that got on stand and said, listen, even if she had used deadly force, this deadly force is justifiable. Like, it was okay. You know, forget the mistake. deadly force was actually justifiable. So whether it was the gun, whether it was the taser, she had the right to do that. And then, of course, I think there was Kim Potter's testimony. You build all the way up to that. And again, like we just talked about, the jury wants to get into the mind of Kim Potter. When Kim Potter got on stand, they had that same prerequisite. Well, what were you thinking? And she was not able to get that out. She was not able to get out a lot of thoughts. So I think that we talked about the defense having all these win-win-wins. I don't think that they ended up on a good note. And she couldn't give us any insight specifically about what was going on in her mind. She just couldn't get out. And I think that those two witnesses were especially very, very, I guess, provocative, if you will, and interesting, and gave a lot of insight into what these particular jurors need to look at. They were the ones that really changed the game.
Candace, final question. Let's go back to the deliberation and the fact that they're still trying to find that consensus. Give us an idea with all this stuff that's going on. Once again, a highly emotional, highly charged case, a very high profile case. Give us a sense of what's happening inside that jury deliberation room right now with maybe, I don't know how many people could be holding out, 1, 2, it could be half of them, whatever. Whose job is it to try and convince the other side? What are they doing? Is it emotional? Are they yelling? Are they screaming? Are they just trying to convince? How are they selling each other's side to each other?
Listen, Mike, I think that they're checking off all those boxes that you listen. We've got 6 men, 6 women. There might be differences there in terms of how they see it. You've got 2 Asians, 1 African-American woman. You have a few people who are young. So you have a lot of people from different generations, different races, and just different ideologies in terms of what it means when a police officer stops you on the street. You have to have insight from all of these different people for what it means to be a Black man in this country, even an Asian in this country. I'm sure that there's conversations swirling all around that. What does it mean to be a person of color in this country stopped by the police? They might be split a lot amongst political lines, right? We're in the middle of Minneapolis. They might be split amongst, what is this going to do for the community? But as you said, who gets the order? This foreperson is the person that has to keep the order and keep things on track. And what they also have to do is come out with the questions. And as we've gone over before, one of the questions, and it seems like the jury is particularly exhausted, is if we can't do this, what's our out? What's the way out of this if we just can't come to a consensus? So I'm sure that there's a lot of battlegrounds. Sure, there's a lot of yelling. Sure, there's a lot of, well, what if, and you don't know, and to be in this country and to be stopped by a woman and all of this and their training. There's so many questions. Everything is going on in that jury. I think today, though, specifically, we are going into our 15th hour. I have to tell you, I would not have been surprised had we had our deliberations done by yesterday. The 15th hour is quite a bit. They are definitely split on some type of lines, but I would expect that today that we would have to get a verdict. It's based upon their questions yesterday, Mike.
All right, we'll see if we can get a consensus one way or another today, but jury deliberation and the jury watch continues in the Kim Potter trial. Candace Kelley, I know you'll be watching as well. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll check back in with you a little bit later.